What's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about how Google Stadia's failure shows exactly why the Nintendo Switch actually succeeded, despite what some people were saying Nintendo should have done at the launch of the system, or just being the system itself. So before we get into all that, guys, please make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe if you're someone new and you enjoy daily content. Now, there was a report from Mr. Jason Schreier, who talked about the failings and the business practices of Google Stadia and what they did in order to be competitive in the gaming market. And it seems like you had just a bunch of suits and people with a lot of money who decided that throwing money at things is the way to get into the gaming industry, almost like the Washington Redskins of the NFL, but they failed badly, just like the Washington Redskins, or more like not the Redskins anymore, Washington football team fails badly pretty much every single year. Throwing money at everything and just thinking that everything's just going to magically work doesn't always work out that way. But Google Stadia and the people in charge felt like that was the way to go about things. Now, this report talks about a number of business things that they did, which we will go over, and I'll tie that back into how things operated with Nintendo and what some people were saying when it comes to the discussions that I had with gamers back in 2016, 2017. So according to Jason Schreier, he put this on via Twitter, but the full article link will be on Bloomberg. That's the site that he reports on, or he works for. And he says that new from me on the failure of Google Stadia. They missed the initial sales targets by hundreds of thousands, not thousands, but hundreds of thousands. They tried to take on consoles rather than starting small. To bring in games like Red Dead Redemption, Google spent astronomical sums, tens of millions each. Not on all of it together, but each. Now, there's also more. It doesn't just stop right there. Just to reiterate the absurdity of this thing, sources say Google spent tens of millions of dollars, the budgets of some major games per Stadia port. Publishers like Ubisoft and Take-Two were raking it in. Pay $20 million to Ubisoft to port Assassin's Creed and The Division, or pay $1 million to 20 small developers to each build something cool, betting that at least one of them will be a hit like Stardew Valley or Valheim. Stadia had a lot of issues, but its fatal flaw was marketing. If it had started with a muted launch and grown from there, rather than promising to be the future of gaming, trying to take on Xbox and PlayStation right away, we might be telling a different story right now. So this story, this whole thing that happened, it's eerily similar, right? Obviously, when it comes to, maybe some of you guys might not know what I'm talking about, but this let's get Red Dead, this let's buy and get all the biggest games, that's the way that you need to compete against the big dogs. That's exactly the type of attitude that people were saying, some were saying at the launch of the Nintendo Switch and pretty much throughout the Nintendo Switch's lifespan. I had conversations with so many people, some content creators, saying that Nintendo needs to go out there and spend and money hat a bunch of big games in order to be competitive with Microsoft and Sony, because look at what happened with the Wii U. Of course, they ignored the Nintendo 3DS and ignored Nintendo's previous systems that didn't have to do that to be successful. But once again, I've already talked about that before. So this type of business strategy, not only is it idiotic from Google, it's like, why would somebody want to spend $60 on a streaming version when they can get the game on an already established platform to where you digitally download it and you're not reliant upon internet 100% of the time in order to play your game? Like, what's the point? And once again, it was full priced. So this never made sense to me. I don't see how somebody logically from a business perspective can sit there and say that's a good idea. But that same type of money-hatting thought process and cognitive was in a lot of Nintendo gamers' mind, which is also interesting because the Wii U did that at the beginning. It had Call of Duty and Batman and all these bigger type of games, and it still failed because people weren't trying to pay $60 or full price or buy the game again on a system when they already have a system that can do it, that's established, where all their friends are playing and everything like that. It's a failing strategy, and I'm not exactly sure why Google Stadia didn't see what happened with the Wii U and what Nintendo tried to do, because Nintendo did money hat a lot of those big third-party games at the launch of the Wii U. And when it came to the Switch, it didn't have all those. It didn't have the Call of Duties and the Batmans and all the stuff that Nintendo money had it for. And people were calling them out on that and saying Nintendo shouldn't have done that. But that was smart on Nintendo's hand not to do that. Why pay all that money when a lot of the people complaining probably weren't going to buy the game anyway? Because that's exactly what happened with the Wii U. They weren't going to buy the system and they weren't going to buy the games anyway, because all of those third-party ports on the Wii U actually ended up doing fairly bad. People at launch didn't go and pick them up. People picked up like New Super Mario Bros. And they played Nintendo Land, and some picked up Zombie U. But for the most part, all of those ports that Nintendo paid for, they all did pretty bad in comparison to the other systems. One, because of the install base, two, because of the prices, and three, because there was no need to get it once again. So the same issues, the same problem that you saw is with Google Stadia. Nintendo missed their forecast with the Wii U by several hundreds of thousands, if not more. Now Google Stadia misses that because they feel that it's a good idea to do this silly thing with money hiding the big games that people already have and have been playing. Now with the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo did the smart thing. They invested into the indie game development. They said, hey, we're going to make sure that we promote these guys. We're going to make sure that we kind of get them out there. We want to build small. We're going to start with our own content. Let's get people something that they want to play first and foremost, something that's going to say, okay, this is the initial system seller, and then go from there. And that's what Nintendo did. They planned their pipeline of software and they built it step by step with indie games and smaller games kind of filling in some of the gaps, like Disgaea, for example, that came in the first year of the Nintendo Switch. I know Minecraft ended up coming. There was SteamWorld Dig 2. There were some great indie games in between. Some of them already available, but now with the added possibility of portable play and also console play, it was something that, okay, I'll go ahead and check this out. This is something different, and it gives me an advantage that I didn't have before. So when you look at it that way, Nintendo actually did it a very smart and intelligent way and invested in themselves. Invest in your own software and have a steady flow of software throughout that launch year and build it with some of the smaller titles, independent titles. Then if you want something older like a Skyrim or a Doom or something like that, okay, you have that available. You have some other stuff like Resident Evil, but there was no need to go out there and get the biggest games. I mean, I remember some people were saying, oh, Nintendo needs to go out there and pay millions of dollars for like Call of Duty and also for like Madden and for like Batman and for these other things. And I'm thinking, why? Like, what's the point? We saw that already and we saw what happened. But the funny thing is that, yes, that thought process, believe it or not, was definitely out there. And if you go back to some of my old videos, you can see people that did say that. But that would have been a disaster, and that would have been a waste of money, because it would have been almost the same thing that we got with the Wii U, with nobody buying those games at the beginning and people probably just playing Zelda and Splatoon and some of the other first-party games that were coming out and buying the indie games that they wanted to buy, because there were some indie games on the Wii U that actually did really well in comparison to the bigger major games, because it offered something kind of new and different way to play, and of course wasn't full price, like for example Bit Trip Runner, that series. So for me, it's pretty cool to see that Nintendo and what they did was kind of justified. And yes, there's still some areas to where they can improve when it comes to third-party support, when it comes to having some extra features and stuff like that. Like, I fully get it. So it's not like they did everything perfect or anything like that, but at the same time, when you're starting something completely new, right, when you're pretty much going from almost ground zero, obviously there's a base of fans and you have some ideas, but when you're pretty much starting over and you're saying, hey, this is a clean break, this is the Switch, this is something different from what we've done before, it's a hybrid and all that, you can't sit there and spend all this money on different things that aren't going to get you your end result or what other people have. You've got to be a little bit unique, and you've got to believe in yourself and invest in yourself. Now with Google Stadia, I agree with what Jason Schreier had to say when it comes to investing in the smaller developers and paying them and seeing if one of them is going to be a hit, like Stardew Valley. But I also feel that they should have invested more into their own games. They should have hired some developers themselves, like with $20 million or $30 million or all these millions. You could have easily put together some really dope first-party games and said, hey, you can only play this on Google Stadia, and say, you know what, you can download it, you know, to your drive if you want to download it, or to your PC hard drive, whatever the case is. You could have done that, and I think that it would have been far more successful. Even with that, yes, the marketing was off, I get that, but I think far more people would have tried Google Stadia if you had the option to stream or download the game, and they had some really dope smaller end games that were really fun to play. So that's what they should have done, because if you look at a lot of these Kickstarter or indie games, I mean, 3-4 million can go a long way to getting a great game. Games like Hollow Knight were funded on that type of budget, right? Heck, they wanted way less than that. You could have got yourself some Hollow Knight style of game, could have got yourself like a SteamWorld Dig. These type of games could have helped build the atmosphere, and then you spend that 10 million plus or whatever the case is on a first party game, getting people that know how to build a really cool first party game that you can only play on Google Stadia, and you can have that on your desktop or have that on your phone or have that on wherever you want to play it. That would have been a compelling offer to so many people out there, and it would have been better if they can just build upon it. You make a lot of money off of those sales of that game, you build on it, and you get another studio. So that's kind of how you have to move things up, going all in and kind of going crazy, putting everything on the table just right then and there to try to take on Microsoft and Sony for what? It's a failing proposition that we saw already with the Wii U. Nintendo tried to do it, and they got absolutely bopped. Be yourself, be unique, try something new, and invest in yourself and invest in the small developers that can help build a certain edge or uniqueness to your platform, just like Nintendo did with the Switch with certain indie games, man, that I loved at the launch of the system and moving forward. So to me, it was just a silly type of thing. We saw what Nintendo's done with the Indie World presentations and how good games have done on there. But it's kind of crazy that Google Stadia, with all the brain power and money and business executives and degrees that they have, that they couldn't see that what they are doing was going to end up to fail. Because I saw this from an absolute like country mile away, man. So it is what it is. But what are you guys' thoughts on this when it comes to it? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Check out the links in the description. We've got Twitter. Go and give us a follow on there. Stay up to date on all the latest gaming news and information. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.